Russian meddling.
He mocked and chastised people who were warning about it.
I'd advise Mr. Trump to stop whining and go try to make his case to get votes.
I can tell you our internal polling in the key battleground states shows a doubling of support for tax cuts. So while American people are getting more of their money, Democrats are doubling down against it.
As the March 5th deadline looms for a deal on DACA, the Supreme Court may step in as soon as today.
If they do take the case, they would hear it and decide it by June.
A brand new poll shows 77% think more effective health screening and treatment could have prevented last week's shooting in Florida.
United States moves on. They advance to face the Czechs in a quarterfinal matchup here in Pyeongchang.
What's wrong with being confident? What's wrong with being confident?
Did you see that? There's not a single car on the avenue in the Americas right now. No, it's...
There really is not.
No, it is. Keep in mind, it's a Tuesday after a holiday Monday, and people aren't up yet, except us.
This is the benefit. This is the benefit of going to work so early in the morning for all of us.
But
no traffic.
I did go out to dinner last night on a Monday night, and I had to wait 20 minutes. I think everyone partied last night. They partied to their favorite president because yesterday was President's Day.
Look at that. Oh, there went a cab.
Right.
And, wait, what? You went out to a restaurant last night? You were partying
on a Monday night. I said I need to go out. It's really quick. You know, it's Monday night. I'll be able to go quickly eat and leave. And I had to wait 15 minutes on a Monday night because I sensed that either that it's also winter break.
Did you make a reservation?
No.
Okay.
But when you walked in, did they know who you were? Were they like, it's Brian Kilmeade?
No, absolutely not.
Escort him in. They made Brian Kilmeade wait.
How dare they?
Oh, boy.
It's incredible. That won't happen again.
All right. Well, we're setting the table, and we're going to tell you what is going on. Yesterday, the President of the United States sent out an interesting tweet. You know, the Mueller indictment on Friday, all about the troll factory and those 13 Russians. Well, the President of the United States wanted to know about, hey, why is everybody talking about me colluding? It was the former president who knew all about it before the election and beyond. He tweeted this.
He said Obama was president up to and beyond the 2016 election. So why didn't he do something about Russian meddling?
That's a fair question.
Yeah, in fact, if you think about it, for 8 years, the one thing that can characterize the Obama 8 years is we're going to reset things with Russia. Remember, the first thing he did is pull those the defensive missile system out of Eastern Europe. The second thing he did was send Secretary of State Hillary Clinton there with a reset button. And then, of course, him leaning over to Medvedev and saying, you know, after this election, we're going to be able to really, I'll be free to do a lot more things. And then when all this stuff came up with James Clapper in charge and John Brennan running the CIA, what news did they make in pushing back on Russia? Almost none.
Well, even Adam Schiff was saying, why didn't President Obama do something about this? He's the leading Democrat on the House Intel Committee.
That's right. So we're about to play for you a soundbite just about 3 weeks before the election of President Obama, who knew at the time the Russians were trying to rig our elections. And why did we know now that he knew? Because a month earlier, he said he had told Putin, knock it off. And he believed that Putin did. At least that's what he told the press. But nonetheless, listen to how the fact that the former president knew it was going on, yet diminished the fact that people were talking about it. Watch.
There is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections. There's no evidence that that has happened in the past, or that there are instances in which that will happen this time. And so I'd advise Mr. Trump to stop whining and go try to make his case to get votes.
And he did. And they came out yesterday. Jay Johnson came out yesterday and said, hey, listen, we tried to tell you, but it was the weekend of the Access Hollywood tape. Really? So one weekend after 8 years, you come out October 7th and say, yeah, we have evidence that Russia is doing something through social media to affect our elections. I don't really think that is that effective.
Right. But the president knew right then when he was saying that it was going on. But he said there is no serious person out there that would think that. There is no evidence that it has happened in the past. Stop whining, Mr. Trump.
See, when I heard that soundbite this morning, when we were preparing for the show and we played back that soundbite from him, I thought, okay, well, this is another example about how President Trump was right. I mean, he predicted this when he was running, and people laughed at him. No one expected him to win.
Mitt Romney was right.
Mitt Romney was right. Yeah. So it just reminded me of how in touch he is with the American people and how the American people feel.
And you know what it underlines, too? If we could pull politics out of it, we were attack in a sophisticated way in which you expect Madison Avenue to come up with in another era. Inside our elections, they tried to divide us to the Russians through their bots, through social media, which we created, and have been quite effective. And the fact is, when a Michael Moore shows up at an anti-Trump rally after the election, and it turns out that was sponsored by the Russians, do you really think Michael Moore was collaborating with the Russians? It was unwitting collaboration. They can't have a collaboration unwitting. I apologize for that. An unwitting participant in this act. So we have to find a way to push back. Do you know that they're already working on dividing us after the horrific shooting on Wednesday? Sure. There's social media aspects pushing us apart on the gun program.
So if Americans were if this was unwitting, if Americans were not involved in this, why is the mainstream media pushing the collusion and continuing to do it? Is it because they just don't like this president?
Well, you be the judge, but here's one of the interesting things. Byron York tweeted this out yesterday. You know, we've heard so much about how these Facebook ads impacted the election, right? Although the Mueller indictment says that didn't really happen. The Russians, this is how much the Russian bot factory spent on Facebook ads in the important state of Pennsylvania. $300. You know how much they spent in Michigan? $832. You know how much the Russians spent in Wisconsin? They spent $54 after the primary. Do you think that turned an election? Come on.
Yeah. And the other thing is, there's a lot of people, you can put $1 zillion in. There's a lot of people who are just not going to, are not on social media, period. You know, it's not like you're doing direct mail that everyone's going to see, and you're buying billboards that you can't help but notice. Meanwhile, I sense that if it ended right now, we could go to attacking back and preventing this happening again. But unfortunately, people are waiting to see what Robert Mueller's coming up with next. And now they're starting to worry about the business aspect of people in and around the Trump organization. The last one rumored to be in the line of fire is Jared Kushner. So that's the distraction that keeps us from working on preventing the next Russian attack.
There's also a new poll talking about tax reform and what you, the American people, how you feel like it's affected your life. And it turns out this president, this administration is actually winning over some Democrats, especially after Nancy Pelosi said this.
The debate on health care is life-death. This is Armageddon.
In terms of the bonus that corporate America received versus the crumbs that they are giving to workers to kind of put the schmooze on is so pathetic.
Well, apparently it is putting the schmooze on Americans, and more Americans are approving about this the more they hear about it. Take a look. A brand new poll out right now, 51% of Americans approve of it. You go back to December, and it was 14% less. What's going on? Well, people are realizing they got a little more money in their paycheck, plus all of those tax cuts and it impacting the companies, so they're able to give $1,000 bonuses, $2,000 bonuses as well.
That was New York Times Survey Monkey. And even though support remains low among the Democrats, it did double over the past 2 months.
Went from 8 to about 20%. So that's good news for the Republicans, because on the generic ballot, the Republicans, while they were down 15 points, a month or two ago? Now they are up by 1. We're going to talk to Matt Schlapp about that from CPAC in about 5 minutes.
But Republicans did get another body blow yesterday as a very popular, talented congressman from Florida, Congressman Rooney, said, I'm retiring, that is it. So another seat open. These rash retirements is something we should really look at. And you wonder what's going on there, because you're in the majority. If you're ever going to have an impact, now's the time you have an impact, and about 30 are heading for the gates.
Well, as Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, who could be for lower taxes, higher wages, and a booming economy?
Exactly. Meanwhile, let's talk a little bit about this. The phones were booming over at ABC. Apparently, they've received something like 25,000 phone calls over the last couple of days when Joy Behar said this.
It's one thing to talk to Jesus. It's another thing when Jesus talks to you. That's called mental illness, if I'm not correct. I'm hearing voices.
So Christians are mentally ill, essentially. They She has since said she was just joking, trying to put it behind him, but a lot of people have hurt feelings.
The president of Media Research Center, his name is Brent Bozell. He's been on Fox a lot. He wrote this open letter, and he said he's going to start going after advertisers if she doesn't apologize because she offended so many people. He's encouraging Christians to tune out of that show and ABC if she doesn't come out and apologize.
I thought they were until we started giving them so much attention, but you brought that up with the vice president yesterday, a couple of days ago.
When I heard that ABC had a program that likened my Christianity to mental illness, I just couldn't be silent. My Christian faith is probably the most important thing in my life. I do try and start every day reading the Bible. My wife and I try and have a prayer together before I leave the house every morning. But I do think I'm a very typical American. I think people of all different faith traditions cherish their faith in God, and to have ABC have a forum that spoke in such demeaning terms, I think it's evidence of how out of touch some in the mainstream media are with the faith and values of the American people.
Well, the American people did call, as I said earlier, at least 25,000 phone calls to ABC that we know of.
Yeah, let us know what you think. We'd love to read your emails.
I'll tell you what, no one complains when we toss to Jillian, right?
I don't know.
Right.
Maybe they do.
Let's go check. Let's go see.
Send those emails in. Let us know.
Right.
Okay, no, seriously, don't do that. Good morning to you guys. Good morning to you at home. Let's get you caught up on some of your news of the day, starting with this. Today, busloads of grieving students from Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School will march on Florida's Capitol, demanding changes to gun safety laws. Their demonstration coming hours after a judge ruled the Florida shooting suspect's childhood records can go public. The documents revealing allegations that Nicholas Cruz lived in a home filled with abuse and neglect. Meantime, Stoneman Douglas High will reopen in phases starting Friday. Classes will likely resume next week. The building where the killings took place will be demolished. The FBI now joining the desperate search for a missing 5-year-old boy in Kansas. According to his stepmother, Lucas Hernandez was last seen inside his home on Saturday afternoon. When she woke up from a nap, he was gone and the back door was open. Police do not suspect Lucas was kidnapped. According to local reports, a relative called Child Protective Services last year, concerned about the child's well-being. Senate hopeful Mitt Romney getting a huge endorsement. President Trump tweeting his support, saying, quote, he will make a great senator and worthy successor to Orrin Hatch and has my full support and endorsement. Romney tweeting back, thanking the president, adding, quote, I hope that over the course of the campaign, I also earn the support and endorsement of the people of Utah. Let's look at your headlines, guys. Big development there.
How long can they keep this truce going?
Yeah, that's the big question.
It's been a day. Let's see if this stays that way.
They did. Thank you, Jillian.
Yep.
They did patch things up. They had that supper that we saw televised on television where they were apparently considering Mitt Romney to be Secretary of State for a while. So look at that.
What do you have, frog legs? Or didn't he have escargot?
I just love the word supper. It reminds me of home.
Supper?
My mom said supper. Yes, instead of dinner, supper. Up here, you don't hear that anymore.
You don't. Well, you do where I come from.
I know. I like it.
All right, coming up on this Tuesday.
All right, President Trump gearing up for his speech at CPAC this week as Republicans gain ground in the midterm polls. So how do they keep that momentum going? CPAC organizer Matt Schlapp knows what history says, knows the challenge, will join us next. That's a very close headshot.
And the video is shocking. A teacher body slamming a student. What happened? We're going to talk about it next.
Oh, boy.
Well, the numbers are in on the big wall, and they're not looking great for Democrats. As a new poll shows for the first time the Republicans gaining ground in the congressional generic ballot.
President Trump touting these numbers, but the big question, can they carry them through the midterm elections in November? American Conservative Union co-chair Matt Schlapp is the organizer behind CPAC, where the president will speak this week, and he joins us now to weigh in on this. Good morning, Matt. Great to see you.
Good to be with you.
What do you make of these new numbers? Will the Republicans be able to carry that through in November?
I think it's the CPAC bounce, clearly, right? all of these polls have shown that the Democrats had double-digit, wide margins going in on the generic ballot as we head closer to November. But this is a very typical ploy on behalf of the media and liberals in the media. They always try to define the race about a year out by saying, the GOP is doomed. We saw this in 2016 with Donald Trump. There's no way that he can possibly win when you look at the polling. And when it comes to politics, especially whether or not the Republicans will be returned to power, it's going to come down to what is the effect on people's lives. And I think it's the word security. They feel greater economic security, and they feel like President Trump is projecting strength overseas and keeping them safe. If they continue to get the policy right, the politics will be just fine.
Well, Matt, if you look at the two parties, they have two completely different messages. The Democrats, it's all about Russia, 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 collusion with this guy. But the Republicans then are talking about, hey, we gave you a tax cut, tax cut, tax cut. And that's kind of reflected in what Capri Cafaro said, where the Democrats have got to be about something. Listen to this.
There's no question that people in Ohio and frankly across the nation care more about the economy, more about jobs, more about health care, more about infrastructure. Democrats have to be for something. We can't just be against Donald Trump. We need to talk about those issues that are important, to the American public. And that is what is going to make us successful in 2018, not being obsessed with Russia.
It looks like the tax cuts are more popular with the American public than Russia.
Yeah, because you know what's happening is people are seeing it affect their bottom line. They're taking home more money in their paycheck. They're having greater opportunity on the job site and with their investments. They see their 401ks and their pensions going up. So it's just a fact. In fact, it's good politics when people feel better about their personal lives. And I think when it comes to the Democratic Party, hashtag resistance is a very interesting folly. They're not willing to work with Donald Trump on this immigration deal. They're not maybe willing to work with him on an infrastructure deal. For Democrats running in red states, that's a stupid strategy.
Matt, what are you going to do at CPAC this week to get that ball rolling for November?
We're going to focus on the Trump agenda and this Republican agenda that has had so much success. And I think we're going to look at what we did last year and then what's coming up this year and making sure people understand how important it is for this agenda to keep rolling.
All right. He is the chairman of CPAC, Matt Schlapp. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
All right. It's 6:20 here in New York City. Meanwhile, it was one of the bloodiest battles of the war in Iraq. Now one Marine is opening up about being on the front lines of Ramadi. Major Scott Husling led 250 troops through the city.
Here's some quick headlines for you. The state of Pennsylvania issuing a new overhauled congressional map ahead of key 2018 races. The state Supreme Court approving the map that will be used in the coming primary. It replaces one that was drawn by Republicans that's accused of being gerrymandered. They are vowing to challenge it in federal court as soon as today. Also in Pennsylvania, the governor ordering all electronic voting machines to keep a paper record. It's just one of the multiple states looking to stop Russian meddling and voter fraud. Down in Georgia, lawmakers are considering doing away with electronic voting altogether. Now down to Brian and one of our nation's finest.
All right, thanks, Ainsley. In 2004, while serving overseas, then Captain Scott Husling saw his newborn daughter live for the very first time on Fox and Friends.
You've gotten the chance to see some photos and probably a video of Bailey, but you've never gotten the chance to see her live, and so we wanted to give you that gift.
She is cute.
And there you go. Wouldn't you get? And what you couldn't see over there through the mind of that Marine, he would carry the weight of leading 254 men through Ramadi, Iraq. Now, Major Husling is sharing his harrowing experience in his brand new book, Echo in Ramadi, the firsthand story of U.S. Marines in Iraq's deadliest city, and joins us right now. You had 10 to relive that moment. They just told you go to the hotel. You didn't know you were going to be on what was going to be happening, right?
Yeah, it wasn't an option. My boss said you're in the jock of some convoys. Go over to the Ishtar Sheridan. Heard you on the headset. Saw my daughter on a tiny little monitor. Could barely make her out. And there she is. And she's 13 now.
And that was the first time you saw her,
That
right?
was the very first time I actually saw her. And then when I actually saw her, she was 5 months old.
Wow.
Yeah. And she's talking now. She's 13.
Yeah, she's
Of course
talking.
she's talking. Yeah,
right,
love
because
her.
I have a 14-year-old. I know exactly that time. So now that you're out, you've been out since
There she is.
2013. Wow, she's 13 years old now.
Look at that beautiful girl.
Wow, she is beautiful. And she, I imagine, 8th grade, correct?
Yes, 8th grade. You got it.
So, Midge, you've been out since 2013, and you want to write this book. But you say this book isn't about politics or war. This is about people.
It is. I think it's about the Marines that are in it. It's obviously my story, but I wrote Echo and Ramadi as a tribute to my Marines, and they were the whole reason I started this project. And it's their shared experiences, obviously the fighting, the friction, all those things that we experienced in such a dynamic environment as they were thrust into the chasm of war in Ramadi, which was the deadliest city in '06 during the surge. But it's really about the people and the feelings and the emotion, and that's what makes this book so different. Process, it was interesting that I understood a little bit more about myself. I understood a little bit more about my Marines. Some of the funny stories came out, some of the heartbreaking stories as well, but it was just a great process to be able to share their story.
What changes when you go through a life and death situation with a large group of people and you're responsible? What changes about a relationship?
Well, what's great about our relationship between the Marines and the families is the families were there to support us while we fought, and they still do today. But we have this remarkable chemistry, Brian, that, as you know, Marines have that's inextricable. You just can't replace it.
And it's through generations, isn't it? Not only the people you fought with, but...
Yeah, it is. So these Marines were not the most elite group of Marines, but we had this remarkable chemistry. And to lead them under those types of conditions, you know, throughout writing the book and through age and experience, and you know this, you gain a little wisdom along the way, is that I never really saw how young they were. And look at those faces of those guys. They're 18, 20 years old in most cases, and I could never have been more proud of them than I was in those Marines in Echo Company. But I didn't see 20-year-old Brian. I saw Sergeant Kilmeade or Corporal Kilmeade, and that's who I was tasking on the battlefield, to do these superhuman acts every single day, day in and day out, in the face of great uncertainty, as these guys are surrounded by most certain danger. And they performed amazing every single time as we were fighting the enemy.
What's interesting too, and they say that about war, that you got to adapt. You could have the best plan, but everything changes as soon as the first shots are fired. It really happened here. The invasion was perfect. The post-invasion wasn't, and you got the worst nightmare that happened. You had to have urban warfare, and you guys had to learn on the fly. In the beginning, it wasn't working, so you adapted, you changed, and you won. What is that like?
Well, I don't think there was ever a metric of success where they say, hey, Scott, did you win or lose? I get that question a lot. Whether...
Well, you could say that you suppressed the city.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if there were bad guys to kill, my Marines were absolutely effective. That's what they did, and that's a tough thing to do. And that picture you saw up there, I ordered my Marines that day before we were thrust into the city of Ramadi. I had to look at that sea of sturdy faces you just saw in that picture, and I had to order my men to kill, because I never wanted them to hesitate at that singular moment when they had to make that critical decision to squeeze the trigger on that rifle and kill the enemy, because that's what Marines do. They're trained and they take orders, and they performed phenomenally.
Right, and lastly, you've been 10 deployments, the first Persian Gulf War to the end. How have you changed?
I think I've gotten better. I look back, who was that 18-year-old Lance Corporal that fought in Desert Shield and then it's through this amazing network of supporters that have gotten behind Echo and Ramadi. Guys like Fox News being Ollie North, being Wes, Dale Dye, Major General Livingston, Medal of Honor recipient, and all the Marines and my families that have supported this great project. It's just really something different, and it's not just another war story, Brian. It's about the people, and that's what makes it so different.
And that's why every American should grab this story, because it's about us. Echo and Ramadi, the first-hand story of U.S. Marines in Iraq's deadliest city. Scott, thanks for all your service. Thanks for putting it down in black and white. And thanks for doing the hard work of doing the interviews.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
It's great to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's great to see your daughter all grown up, although she's got a lot growing up to do still.
Yeah.
All right, coming up straight ahead, convicted leaker Chelsea Manning spent President's Day dreaming of a world without a president. This morning, the world is responding. And first, Democrats made this comparison about President Trump's reaction to Russia.
Imagine if FDR had denied that the Japanese attacked us at Pearl Harbor and didn't react. That's the equivalent.
All right, I'll pull your jacket down to the back. Now, one congressman is comparing it to 9/11. Dan Bongino is here to react next. In fact, he's getting closer. But first, happy birthday to supermodel Cindy Crawford. She turns 52 today and doesn't know I exist.
That's the building we're in.
Right. And if the music was up, it would have been Kelly Pickler.
Right, if we had
It would
turned
have
the
been really
volume
good.
up.
Right, but
Well,
yeah,
you know,
I kept it down. It was my fault.
Meanwhile,
Had it on
this,
mute.
this man over here is approaching the status where he would have a hard pass to get into the building. It's Dan Bongino. He was with Tucker last night live, and now he's up first thing in the morning.
Yeah, I was saying, my influence in a Metro card gets you on the train free every time. Sometimes I'm so powerful, you don't have to mention my name. You just show the Metro card. It's
Well,
great.
you're in the right room.
Let's get into some of this news. Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro down in the state of Texas, many are saying that he might be running for president in 2020.
He'll be a shoo-in.
He likened the Russia interference in the election to 9/11. Listen to this.
This was an op-ed.
Okay, we're going to read it. While this current situation is not marked by catastrophic bloodshed, destruction, or debt, we've entered a new generation of warfare on America's national security. September 11th, 2001 was a moment in our history when a non-state actor effectively identified one of our nation's greatest security vulnerabilities in the airline industry. So keep in mind, 2,700 people died on 9/11. This election meddling, they're telling us, didn't interfere with the election.
You know, you talk about just the peak of insensitivity, comparing it first to Pearl Harbor. I mean, I did your show.
Jerry Nadler.
Talking about, Jerry Nadler comparing it to Pearl Harbor, now to 9/11. Guys, listen, this was very serious, okay? Russia's a geopolitical foe. Everybody understands that. Let's get that out of the way. Nobody should be apologizing for Russia. Nobody on this set is. But comparing a series of Facebook ads designed to change people's minds in an election that I think everybody can acknowledge based on the level of the influence operation didn't do so effectively. Comparing that to the buildings that got knocked down just miles from here is beyond disgraceful. And what's sad is you can expect this kind of literally insane rhetoric to ratchet up because this is what Democrats are pandering to. A base absolutely obsessed with a farcical hoax story. And they have nothing, there's no facts to back it up, so hyperbole is all they have.
But I like to add a couple of things. You realize if we could take a step back and this Mueller probe wraps up, it'll be the Russian dream was to create this derision. They went inside and found what the issues were that divide us, legitimately divided us for generations. Fine. So they jump on those. As soon as we could take a step back, take a deep breath, we'll realize that the dossier seems to be a setup to lure Hillary Clinton in, and these Facebook ads were a setup to lure people who are anti-Trump or pro-Trump in. So this was a manipulation of our system on the whole, not just for one. If we could get politics out of this, we could come up with a strategy to fight this.
But we can't, because the media, there are entities in the media that are absolutely obsessed with tearing down Donald Trump. They are so obsessed with the style over the substance that they're playing exactly into the Russian propaganda. There are people out there, the media got very upset, by the way, because some people tweeted, hey, the media is worse than the Russians were in this. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but there are some people in the media who are playing the Russian game. Read the indictment. They had pro-Hillary, anti-Hillary, pro-Trump, anti-Trump.
Michael Moore was at an anti-Trump rally sponsored by the Russians.
Is he a Russian colluder? Michael Moore? I mean, should there be a special counsel investigation into him? The media is playing right into their hands with this nonsense.
The collusion is clear. There was one campaign that spent $5 million to hire a British spy who then worked with Russians and then wound up with this fake dossier that was used to produce these FISA warrants to spy on ordinary Americans, which should be against the law.
You know, justice isn't blind anymore. Justice will be dead if something doesn't happen here. We have a Hillary Clinton campaign. We absolutely know, what's factual right now, that they fed information through their own Clinton consigliaries into our justice system while simultaneously paying foreign nationals. No one disputes that. Christopher Steele, who also wound up dealing with Russians to get information into our justice system, and nothing really has happened. We'll see what happens with the IG report.
And work in the media to get his message out. Mother Jones on down.
Citing them, Yahoo News, Michael Isikoff, citing their own circular reasoning to get Americans spied on using tools, by the way, we unquestionably used to spy on the worst of us, terrorists, and you're using these same tools to spy on the Trump team with Yahoo News articles? Guys, come on. I mean, this, you know, the constitutional republic can't continue like this.
All right, let's read a tweet from Senator Kamala Harris, who is sad because fewer illegal immigrants are applying for the California DREAM Act to get financial aid. She tweeting this, for the second year in a row, fewer undocumented youth applied for financial aid in California because they are distrustful of our government. This is a direct product of Trump's anti-immigrant agenda. No one in America should ever have to live in fear of our government.
Our government.
Yeah, this is really disturbing because when They still don't get why Trump won. The American people are tired of being sidelined for secondary and tertiary interests. We get it. We've been a compassionate country. We have taken in literally millions of people, immigrants from countries all over the world, for this beacon of light and freedom, this great country. But suggesting somehow that we are not generous enough or we're not doing the right thing by people.
Or that undocumented are equal to citizens?
They're not. You know, guys, you know the story, okay? My wife came here legally. I ask everyone out there the same question all the time when they say this to me. They say, well, don't you want to be compassionate? Well, how is it compassionate to people who sat in line and waited and did the right thing? And by the way, what is a very broken legal immigration process, but it's still the process.
Right.
They paid tens of thousands of dollars in attorney fees. How is it fair to them to say, you know what? By the way, this guy or woman who came here illegally, they get the same thing you did, and they did none of that.
You know what bothers me most is that tweet resonates maybe with the people that put her in office. And she is not, she in California, and that shows the divide in the country where illegals deserve the same status as legal Americans.
Tell you right now, it doesn't resonate in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and swing states where people work their butts off for a living and are tired of paying taxes to support people who don't want to obey the same rules they have to obey.
All right, he's going to be on overtime, outnumbered overtime.
I'm one lucky guy today.
God, you're all over the place. Last night, this morning.
I know. I don't sleep. I don't sleep anymore, ever. It's ridiculous. Look at these eyes.
You
guys spice me up. You know, I like it.
I find you to be a very handsome man.
Thank you.
Yes.
You talk about it on the radio show.
Hey, Julian, do you think he looks well rested?
Want me to let you guys continue? I mean, that's fine if you need more time. That's fine.
I'm just trying to get out crazy, but he doesn't look tired, does he?
No, you don't look tired.
I'm
You
used to
just
not sleep.
look wonderful. Just like, you know.
Sleep 2 hours a night.
You're great. All right, guys, let's get you caught up on some of your news, okay? Starting with this. A substitute teacher in North Carolina is fired after a video emerges showing him body slamming a middle school student. Well, the student says it started after the teacher took away his Valentine's Day chocolates. The child's family says they'll take legal action. His shoulder and back are badly bruised. The police say the video doesn't capture the entire incident. They are currently investigating. Imagine a world without a presidency. Convicted secrets leaker and Senate hopeful Chelsea Manning slammed for dissing the president on Twitter. Some people quick to point out she would still be in prison if we didn't have a president. Last year, Obama commuted her 35-year prison sentence for leaking military documents. One person calling her a hypocrite, tweeting back, quote, "Imagine a world where someone running for Senate is criticizing basic structures of our government." A family gets the shock of their lives when they find a cougar right outside their house. The Wisconsin couple checking their security camera after finding paw prints in their yard. That's when they saw the big cat, look at that, peeking into the window. Wildlife officials think it came from South Dakota and was looking for a mate. Neighbors now being warned to keep their animals inside. Yikes. Let's look at your headlines, guys. Can you imagine seeing
They think it belonged to someone? Like that's a house pet?
No.
No, I don't.
They said
no.
keep your animals inside.
Keep your
so it
animals
doesn't
inside.
eat them.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
got it. Got it.
All right. Thanks, Jillian.
You know, some people have exotic animals.
They do.
I've done those stories.
Yes.
All right, still ahead. Andrew McCarthy, Newt Gingrich, and Ben Shapiro. They're all here live.
Plus,
different stuff.
Robert Mueller's indictments show no sign of Trump collusion, but now a judge is ordering him to surrender any evidence that could exonerate Mike Flynn. Coincidence? Judge Napolitano does not think so.
Wow, jog
You'll
up
hear him
the
say
stairs.
that.
You never jog up the
How you doing?
stairs.
What you want, you can't always get what you want.
We've been telling you about Mueller's indictments, the 13 Russians charged for meddling in our election with no sign of any Trump collusion.
This, as a new judge in the case against Michael Flynn, ordered on Friday Mueller to surrender any evidence that could exonerate him. And Judge Napolitano says that may be no coincidence. He joins us right now. Why would the judge do that?
You know, I've never heard of this. So Mike Flynn pleads guilty to lying to the FBI in December. The judge before whom he pleads guilty takes himself off the case. Why? Because that judge is also on the FISA court, and he may very well have authorized the wiretap that surveilled Mike Flynn when he was talking to then Ambassador Kislyak, which is the alleged lie that he told the FBI about. Okay, so Mike Flynn pleads guilty. A new judge comes in. It's time for sentencing. Bob Moses, we don't want to sentence him till May. That's normal. If you have a cooperating witness, you don't want to sentence the witness until after the cooperation is finished. And then the judge, on his own, not in response to any application from General Flynn's lawyers, says, by the way, I want all exculpatory evidence that could help Flynn or hurt the government, turned over, pardon me, to Flynn's lawyers. Why would he want that after General Flynn has already pleaded guilty? That is unheard of. He must suspect a defect in the guilty plea, meaning he must have reason to believe that General Flynn pleaded guilty for some reason other than guilt. Do people plead guilty for a reason other than guilt?
Yes.
Yes, Brian. Unfortunately, yes.
What do you think the reason is?
Sometimes they'll say, right, lay off my son, and I don't want to have to mortgage my house again to pay my legal fees. So give me something to plead guilty to so that this can be over with. Right. So now the question arises, was he guilty? Did he lie to the FBI? Did the FBI agents who interviewed him, one of whom was Peter Strzok, actually believe that he lied? Or did they say, we don't see anything wrong, but senior management said, well, we do. We think it was a lie. We don't know the answers to that, but it may very well come out as a result of Judge Sullivan, a very courageous federal judge in D.C., ordering this information to be revealed.
So what do you think will happen?
It's hard for me to say what will happen, but if it was a faulty guilty plea, if the government accepted the guilty plea knowing he wasn't guilty, the lawyers involved have a very serious problem.
That makes sense, because we told the story last week about how James Comey told members of Congress, we believe Michael Flynn did not lie to the FBI.
Right, and then after Comey is fired, the same crew says that we think he lied.
Okay. 10 seconds. Why would they indict 13 people that will never go see prison?
To smoke out any Americans that helped them. I think that a lot of Americans who don't know this are under surveillance to see what their reaction is if it's a whoosh, they didn't get me.
But they said Americans weren't involved.
That's what they said, but that might not have been what they meant.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome,
More Fox and
guys.
Friends coming up.
One memorial project is underway to remember the American troops who served and gave their lives in combat during World War I. And today we have a scale model right here on Fox and Friends. To give us a first look, we've got joining us right now here in the studio, sculptor Sabin Howard and the chairman of the U.S. World War I Commission, Terry Hamby. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Thank you for having us.
Terry, Washington, D.C. has got every war memorial for every American war except for World War I. Why?
It's a national tragedy that we've overlooked the service of 4.7 million Americans and the sacrifices that they made in World War I. They shaped the world that we live in today.
And this is personal for you. You have a family member who was in the big one.
I do. I have a grandfather and a great uncle who was in World War I. My great uncle was killed in action. And that's the reason the commission was formed. There's no longer a survivor of World War I, and it's up to us to speak for those who no longer are here so that they and their families may be recognized with this memorial.
Well, the memorial is beautiful. You've already got the land. It's going to be to the east of the White House. Sabin, tell us a little bit about this, because this piece of art has never been done before. This is not the actual memorial. This is just a depiction of what it's going to look like.
This is an idea of what it will become. So you're looking at a bronze wall that will eventually be created 65 feet in length, 11 feet high, with 38 figures, all marching towards the future, which is that image of World War II at the end.
It's so beautiful. And given the new technology, explain how you use computers to actually build this.
Well, I traveled to New Zealand to Weta Workshop, and we did something that's never been done before, where we used digital equipment to take out the grunt work in the middle. And then I went back to creating it with my hands, which is the traditional way that's been done for how many thousands of years.
Fantastic. So the finished product will be built by humans or by computers?
No, by humans. Traditionally cast, poured bronze in a foundry, transported across the country and installed.
Okay, so Terry, this is beautiful, but it does come with a price. You're trying to raise some money, aren't you?
We are. It was mandated that it be placed in Pershing Park by Congress, and it was also mandated that it be built with public funds. So we have a fundraising drive underway, and as I say, it's a national tragedy. These were the first men to deploy to a country that they'd never visited, fight in a war that they didn't start, and die for peace and liberty for people they didn't know. So it's up to us to recognize this sacrifice.
Well, it will be built. This is what it's going to look like. If you would like to find out how you can help, you can go to foxandfriends.com. Also, they've got a website. It's www.1cc.org. All right. Guys, thank you very much for joining us live. Meanwhile, one sheriff is making sure teachers are prepared after last week's school shooting by giving them free concealed carry lessons. He's going to join us in the next hour. Plus, Andrew McCarthy, Newt Gingrich, and Ben Shapiro.